Welcome to the review for the final video here. As you can see, I have the study sheet that I made up the other day here for us to sort of take a look at. I'm going to be going through this kind of briefly and sort of talking about my expectations in terms of what I perceive your knowledge should be of these things as we head into the final quiz. Remember, the final quiz is going to be released on Monday. It will encompass what I call the sort of technical side of things. It will also encompass the photographers we've done up to this point. Um, the idea behind this quiz is the understanding of concepts. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that you're going to look up and define what aperture is, or you're going to look up and find the answer to some multiple choice question, but rather understanding the concept, understanding concepts as it relates even to potential photographers will be necessary in order to sort of show to me that you sort of understand the concepts up to this point. I've brought up a couple other tabs, maybe you see at the top there, which are relevant to what you need to sort of understand in relation to the quiz. Please note that the quiz is going to be available for that entire week. Once you start it though, you have an hour to finish it, and that's how it goes. So make sure when you do start it that you do have a full hour. Really no kind of exceptions on that. You guys know your lives, the time you have, access to computers, etc. In order to sort of get this done. So let's take a look at this. And again, I'm going to sort of briefly go through it. Metering for light here, first sort of bullet point was the first week, or maybe the second week, and it sort of encompasses these three things. These three things were also, or these two of these, aperture and shutter, were handouts. You should go back, you should understand aperture, which is sort of gone over in great depth here in relation to how large the aperture opening is, in relation to how much light is coming in. Understand the concept. Understand that when you open your aperture, you're letting more light in, and therefore often your shutter speeds will get much quicker. The reverse is going to happen when you close your aperture down. Understand how aperture affects depth of field. We did a whole assignment on depth of field. Read this over, sort of understand the concepts of depth of field. Okay. Going back to the list here, shutter speed was, that's going to pop up there, another sheet we did, much more straightforward in terms of what shutter speed does. Understand how shutter speed affects movement, meaning that if things are moving and you have a slow shutter speed, you're going to sort of see that movement. Okay. Let's take a look here. ISO we've talked about. When we talked about, and I mentioned this a couple of places, ISO is your film sensitivity, or in this case your sensor. Your sensor soaks up light at a given rate. The higher the ISO, meaning your numbers go up to 1600, 3200, you're going to be able to photograph in lower light situations. Understand that these three things sort of make up how your camera meters for light. Okay, this is sort of the sort of camera portion of the first few weeks. Most of that was covered in that first few weeks in the handouts. Most of you sort of answered your metering for light discussion, talked about how your camera meters for light, and we've sort of gone from there, photographically speaking. Depth of field, which I just mentioned, is going to have a lot to do with the aperture portion, or the aperture handout. So understand how depth of field is affected by aperture, and how you get shallow depth of field and how you get deep depth of field. Understand the difference between those things. I'm going to pop over to the guide to critique and sort of highlight these three words. We've talked about formal things. We talked about formal things in relation to the first couple projects: line, shape, texture, okay, color. Those are formal elements of a photograph. Technical elements have to do with a lot of things that we've done in Photoshop, things we've done with the camera. Metering for light is a technical thing. I always call metering or technical things sort of nuts and bolts. How do you get something done? And last but not least, which you guys are sort of working on right now, concept. A few of you emailed me and said, oh, I don't understand what the proposal is about. Your proposal was about sort of coming up with a concept prior to going out and photographing. in our first few projects, when you photographed, you kind of just walked around probably and looked for cool or interesting formal things, and worked on your technical stuff. You didn't think about exactly how those images were going to sort of look and feel as a concept. Your proposals, which you guys handed in yesterday, were straight concept. I want to photograph this. The reason I want to photograph this is because blah 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 blah. That's a concept, that's an idea, that's a theme, whatever you want to call it. Those three things are important. Go back, and this is in week 5. You can see all the sort of things I've laid out in terms of the technical. You've seen the things I've laid out in terms of the formal. All this stuff has to do with how you guys critiqued images throughout the semester, how I talked about images when I gave you guys feedback on D2L. And last is the conceptual. Know what the difference between these three things are. You might have to apply it to a photograph. You might have to look at a photograph and say, oh, that's an Ansel Adams. Technically speaking, it is, yes, properly exposed. Formally, it uses line and texture. I might ask you to sort of apply these to particular photographers. That's where my sort of insistence that the understanding of the concept is just as important as sort of knowing the definitions of these things, and I really want to sort of differentiate those two. Okay, you might be able to sort of define what texture is in a photograph, but can you use it to help critique a photograph by one of these photographers? Which leads us to our photographers. Please go back, reread what was sort of written, what you wrote, what others wrote on all the discussions for each of these photographers. We sort of addressed different things on each of these. You should be able to recognize the difference between them. Ansel Adams, black and white landscape. And I'm going to skip down to Robert Frank, black and white street photography. Alex Soth did The Sleeping by the Mississippi. We critiqued that in pretty great lengths. Florian Mayer Aiken did the sort of acidic or infrared landscapes. You guys watched the videos of him manipulating in Photoshop. And Edward Bertinsky did the more straightforward, what he calls the sort of environmental incursion photographs, the shipwrecking, I believe it's called, and the photographs in China. So go back and look at all of these photographers. You should be able to sort of denote what's what. Okay, we have 3 color photographers and 2 black and white photographers. This last little bit has to do with Lightroom and Photoshop file types. This has to do with some of the beginning tutorials of bringing images into Lightroom. DNG standing for digital negative. How to make a collection, what collections are. What is Lightroom? How is it different from Photoshop? The short answer there being Lightroom is a database that sort of keeps track of image edits. It's non-destructive. It's different from Photoshop because it is a database and not just an image editor. Know your adjustment brush, how to set white balance. Again, you might have to go back and look at those videos. What is white balance? What is it sort of described at in those videos? And these last 3 have to do with what we did on your collage projects. So, you know, not horribly in depth, but what are selection tools? What happens when you make a selection? How do we paste? How do we paste into? And then last but not least, the quick mask. Quick mask being the way, and I'm actually just looking over my other screen, and I can see sort of Photoshop selections video, and I can see the quick mask being used. Some of you, as an aside, emailed me and said, I can't find quick mask, and it was because you were using Photoshop Elements, which is not necessarily appropriate. We should have been using Photoshop. Those were apples and oranges. We couldn't do the quick mask because that program does not have it. So, excuse me. You should still know sort of what that means and how it relates to selections. Again, this isn't going to be, there shouldn't be any surprises if you go through this. And again, you have some time to look back at some notes, look back at what you wrote, look back at discussions, etc. It'll be sort of multiple choice, short answer kind of quiz. There'll likely be images or where you have to sort of describe something, where you have to briefly point something out in relation to one of these concepts. Okay, so that is the review for the final. Any questions, clarifications, please email me. I can sort of help you out with that. You will, again, you won't be able to necessarily see the quiz until you start the quiz, so you can't sort of check it out and then run off and study for it. So be ready for it. However it sort of fits into your life next week. Again, that's the beauty of the online course. Just as a side note, in relation to your final projects, I have gotten through about half of the proposals. You should be shooting, but I am writing some quick feedback inside the actual sort of D2L Dropbox, so you can sort of see the feedback. I'm hoping to finish the rest of those up by tomorrow. Remember, you have 75 images due on Monday, and then you have well into that following week. I believe I have Friday as the set date for you to hand in your final, I believe it's 15 images for your final project. So stay in touch on email. Like I said, I will have comments for most of you by the end of tomorrow for your proposals. If you have any specific questions, please email me directly. Good luck with your final shooting. I hope those times out photographing go well. If they don't, please make time for reshoots so that you come through on the final here. Looking forward to seeing it, and again, email me with any concerns.